The gymnasium echoed with the sound of nervous chatter and squeaky sneakers against the polished wooden floor. A hand-painted banner that read, "Choir Tryouts, Follow Your Voice," hung crookedly above the stage, its edges curling as if the words themselves weren't sure they belonged. 12-year-old Darius Carter sat near the back, clutching a wrinkled sheet of lyrics. His fingers tapped anxiously against his knees, keeping time with a silent beat only he could hear. For weeks, he had practiced this song, his mother's favorite hymn, a piece she always said carried the strength of their ancestors. Darius had dreamed of this moment for months. The school choir wasn't just another after-school activity. It was his chance to belong, to show that his voice mattered. But as he looked around, he couldn't ignore the way a few students whispered and snickered when their eyes landed on him. At the front of the room, Mrs. Whitaker, the choir director, stood stiffly with her clipboard. She was a tall woman with perfectly pressed clothes and an expression that seemed allergic to smiles. Everyone knew she played favorites, often choosing the same group of kids year after year. And from the way her eyes skimmed over Darius without pause, it was clear he wasn't one of them. "Next," Mrs. Whitaker called, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. One by one, students climbed the steps, their voices filling the air. Some cracked on high notes, others forgot lyrics. But Mrs. Whitaker nodded approvingly at nearly all of them, scribbling notes on her clipboard. Finally, it was Darius's turn. He stood, legs trembling, and made his way to the stage. The bright lights felt hotter than he expected, washing over him like a spotlight meant to expose every flaw. He gripped the microphone, his palms slick with sweat. "When you're ready," Mrs. Whitaker said flatly. Darius closed his eyes for a moment, summoning the voice his mother always praised at home, the voice his father said had power. He opened his mouth, and the first note poured out, rich, smooth, and filled with something deeper than just sound. The gym seemed to still. Even a few kids who had been whispering moments before went quiet. Darius's voice carried with it a rawness, a kind of ache that didn't sound like a child's. It sounded like generations. But as quickly as the magic began, Mrs. Whitaker's pen scratched across her clipboard. Her expression didn't soften, not even a little. "Thank you," she interrupted abruptly, before he even finished. The final note died in his throat, leaving Darius blinking in confusion. "But I wasn't done," he said softly. Mrs. Whitaker shook her head. "That will be all. Next." Whispers rippled through the group of students. Some smirked, others looked away uncomfortably. Darius stepped down from the stage, his chest tight, his eyes burning. He could hear a boy in the corner mutter, "Guess choir's not for everyone." Mrs. Whitaker's voice carried over the room, announcing the next name, as if Darius's moment had never happened at all. But deep down, in that silence where dreams and doubts collided, a spark began to form inside Darius. A spark that whispered, "This isn't the end." Darius walked out of the gym with his head bowed so low it almost brushed his chest. The laughter of a few kids still rang in his ears, each snicker like a slap against the fragile hope he'd carried all week. His audition, the one he had practiced every evening until his throat felt raw, was over, dismissed in less than a minute. The autumn air outside the school felt cooler than usual, sharp against his damp cheeks. He didn't even realize he had been holding back tears until one slipped down, hot and stubborn, despite his best effort to swallow it back. As he headed toward the sidewalk, he slowed when he heard voices drifting from the open gym door. "Mrs. Whitaker." "His tone is unusual," she said, her voice clipped. "Not the kind of sound we're looking for in this choir." Another teacher replied, "But he has potential, doesn't he?" Mrs. Whitaker sighed. "Potential, yes, but he doesn't fit the image I want to present. The parents expect polish, tradition. Not that." The word that landed like a stone in Darius's stomach. He didn't need her to explain what she meant. He had felt it in her stare, in the way her eyes skipped over him during roll call, in the cold dismissal that had cut off his song. He turned quickly and walked away, his small sneakers crunching against the fallen leaves scattered on the sidewalk. By the time he reached home, The spark inside him felt smothered under a heavy blanket of doubt. His mother, Sharon Carter, was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose. She looked up as he trudged in. "How'd it go, baby?" she asked with a hopeful smile. Darius shrugged, dropping his backpack by the door. "They didn't want me." Sharon frowned, sliding her glasses off. "What do you mean? You've been practicing every day. I heard you this morning. You sounded amazing. They cut me off. Said I wasn't what they wanted." His voice cracked, and he quickly turned toward the fridge so she wouldn't see the tears threatening to fall again. His father, Malcolm Carter, came in from the living room, where the TV was still flickering with the evening news. "Not what they wanted?" he repeated, his deep voice carrying a weight of disbelief. Darius nodded silently. Sharon and Malcolm exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations parents have when words aren't enough. "Come here, son," Malcolm said, pulling out a chair. Darius sat down reluctantly, staring at the table. Malcolm leaned forward, resting his broad hands against the wood. "Listen to me. Sometimes people can't see your worth. Sometimes they'll overlook you, dismiss you, even try to silence you. But that doesn't mean your voice isn't powerful." Sharon reached across the table and placed her hand on Darius's. "You have a gift, baby. Just because one person can't recognize it doesn't mean it's not real." "But what's the point?" Darius whispered. "If they don't want me, then maybe I'm just not good enough." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Sharon said softly, "When I was your age, my choir teacher told me the same thing. Said my voice was too different. But years later, I sang at your auntie's wedding, and half the church was in tears. Sometimes the very thing people reject is the thing that makes you shine." Darius looked up, his eyes wide. "Really? Really?" she said firmly. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming. "And anyway, you don't need that choir to prove yourself. You've got the school talent show coming up, don't you?" Darius blinked. He had almost forgotten. The flyer for the show was still pinned to the fridge, its bold letters reading, "Share your talent, share your voice." "You could audition for that," Malcolm continued. "Sing the same song. But this time, no one can cut you off. The whole school will hear you." Darius hesitated. The thought of standing alone on stage again made his stomach twist. But somewhere deep inside, that spark, the one nearly smothered, flickered again. Sharon squeezed his hand. "You were born with that voice for a reason. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not even Mrs. Whitaker." Darius swallowed hard, nodding slowly. That night, after dinner, he slipped into his room and closed the door. He pulled out his lyrics sheet, smoothing the crumpled edges with careful fingers. He stood in front of the mirror, stared at his reflection, and whispered to himself, "They'll hear me. This time, they'll hear me." The next morning, the school hallway buzzed with chatter as kids clustered around the bulletin board near the cafeteria. A new sheet of paper was pinned there, its bold heading catching Darius's eye. "Talent show sign UPS, 1 week only." He stopped in his tracks, staring at the list of names already scribbled in messy handwriting. Guitar players, dancers, comedians. His throat tightened. The words from the night before echoed in his mind. "You don't need that choir to prove yourself." Darius glanced around. A group of kids nearby laughed loudly, pointing at something on a phone. He shifted his weight, clutching the straps of his backpack. His heart pounded so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Finally, with a deep breath, he stepped forward. The clipboard pen felt heavier than it should have, but his hand moved anyway. Slowly, deliberately, he wrote. When he stepped back, the letters seemed to glow off the page, like a challenge thrown down for the whole school to see. That afternoon, Darius went straight to his room after school. He closed the door, pressed play on his mom's old CD player, and began to practice. His voice filled the small space, bouncing off the walls, carrying a strength even he hadn't realized was there. At first, he stumbled. Notes cracked, lyrics slipped, his confidence wavered. But every time he faltered, he remembered Mrs. Whitaker's face, that dismissive wave of her hand, that cutting thank you before he'd finished. And with each memory, his resolve sharpened. Night after night, he practiced in secret, sometimes humming quietly so his little sister wouldn't overhear, other times pouring his full voice into the room until his throat burned. One evening, Sharon knocked on his door. "Can I come in?" "Yeah," he said, quickly straightening the papers scattered across his desk. She peeked in and smiled softly. "I heard you through the wall. You're getting stronger every day." Darius looked down. "What if I mess up? What if they laugh?" Sharon walked over and sat on the edge of his bed. "Then you hold your head high and keep singing. Because your voice isn't just about hitting the right notes. It's about telling your truth. And nobody can take that away." Her words sank deep, wrapping around his doubt like armor. At school, whispers floated through the halls when kids noticed his name on the talent show list. "You? Singing?" One boy sneered at him near his locker. "Didn't the choir already kick you out?" Darius clenched his jaw but said nothing. He just walked away. Another girl, kinder than most, tapped his shoulder later. "Don't listen to them. I've heard you hum in class. You've got something special." Her encouragement warmed him, even if only for a moment. The week crawled by, each day stretching his nerves tighter. Posters for the show plastered the walls. Friday night, don't miss it, the gym would be full, students, parents, teachers, everyone who mattered, including Mrs. Whitaker. By Thursday night, Darius could barely eat dinner. He pushed food around his plate until Malcolm finally said, "Nerves are normal, means you care. But remember, pressure makes diamonds, son. And that's what you're about to show them." Darius nodded, his chest tight but his spirit unbroken. That night, before bed, he stood at the mirror one last time. His reflection looked back, older somehow, braver. "You've got this," he whispered to himself. Tomorrow the world would hear him. Friday night arrived like a storm. The gymnasium, usually echoing with the bounce of basketballs and the squeak of sneakers, was transformed into something magical. Folding chairs lined the floor, bleachers stretched to the back, and a low hum of chatter filled the air as families, friends, and teachers poured in. The stage was lit with soft, golden spotlights, curtains drawn tight, holding back the promise of what was to come. Backstage, Darius's palms were slick with sweat. He sat on a folding chair, tapping his foot uncontrollably, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the muffled voices of the other performers. Kids with guitars tuned their strings nervously. A girl in sequins stretched her arms, practicing her dance routine. Someone backstage cracked a joke, and laughter rippled through the group. But Darius couldn't laugh. Not tonight. He clutched the small silver cross that hung from his neck, a gift from his grandmother, and whispered, "Please, God, just help me get through this." In the audience, Sharon and Malcolm found their seats near the middle row. Sharon's eyes scanned the program booklet in her lap until she found his name. Darius Carter, vocal performance. She exhaled slowly, gripping Malcolm's hand. "He's ready," Malcolm whispered, his gaze steady. "Tonight, they'll see him." As the talent show began, bursts of applause filled the gym. A comedian cracked silly jokes that had kids giggling. A dance troupe spun across the stage in glittering outfits. A guitarist played a soft melody that quieted the room. Backstage, Darius's turn drew closer with every act. He peeked through a slit in the curtain and scanned the crowd. The bleachers looked endless, faces everywhere, hundreds of eyes. And then he saw her. Mrs. Whitaker sat near the front. Her choir students clustered around her. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But Darius caught it, the faintest smirk when she noticed his name on the program. A cold chill shot through him. But just as quickly, he remembered his mom's words. "Your voice tells your truth. Nobody can take that away." Finally, the MC's voice boomed. "Next up, we have Darius Carter performing a vocal solo." The gym erupted in polite applause. A few murmurs drifted from the choir section. "Wait, him? Didn't he get cut?" Darius's legs felt heavy as he stepped onto the stage. The spotlight blinded him for a moment, and the silence that followed was suffocating. He walked slowly to the microphone, his shoes tapping against the wood floor. He could feel it, the doubt, the whispers, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. His hands trembled as he adjusted the mic. He glanced out at the sea of faces, heart hammering, throat tight. And then, in the corner of his vision, he spotted Sharon. She wasn't smiling, not yet. She just looked at him, steady and unflinching. Her gaze saying everything he needed to hear. Sing, baby. Just sing. The music began, soft piano chords, gentle and slow. The first verse was delicate, a fragile whisper escaping his lips. At first, the crowd shifted in their seats, unsure. But then something shifted. His voice grew stronger, richer, swelling with emotion. The lyrics carried the weight of his struggle, the rejection, the doubt, but also his defiance, his hope, his truth. It wasn't just singing anymore. It was storytelling. The gym fell silent. Even the restless kids in the back stopped whispering. Mrs. Whitaker, arms still crossed, leaned forward ever so slightly, her smirk fading. By the second chorus, Darius was no longer the nervous boy who had stood trembling at auditions. His voice soared, clear, powerful, filled with a raw honesty that tugged at every heart in the room. Sharon covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Malcolm's jaw tightened, pride radiating from him. And as Darius reached the final note, a long, aching, beautiful sound that seemed to hang in the air forever, the gym exploded into thunderous applause. People shot to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even whistling. A standing ovation. Darius stood frozen, chest heaving, sweat glistening on his brow. For a moment he couldn't process it. Then a smile broke across his face. Small, hesitant at first, then unstoppable. He had done it. He had silenced the whispers. He had proven them wrong. The applause still echoed as Darius walked backstage, his chest still pounding with adrenaline. Students waiting for their turn looked at him differently now. Some with wide eyes, others with sheepish glances. The girl in sequins whispered, almost in awe, "That was unreal." Darius smiled nervously, whispering a quiet, "Thanks," before slipping into the dim hallway to catch his breath. Out in the audience, Sharon wiped her cheeks, her heart swelling with pride. She turned to Malcolm, her voice trembling. "Did you see that? Our baby, our boy, he owned that stage." Malcolm's jaw tightened as he nodded, but his eyes glistened. He wasn't one for tears. But tonight was different. The crowd still buzzed with chatter, parents whispering, "Who is he? Didn't he get cut from choir?" Kids shook their heads in disbelief, whispering about how they'd underestimated him. But one face remained stone still. Mrs. Whitaker sat frozen in her chair, lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands, usually busy scribbling critiques in her ever-present notebook, lay still in her lap. The choir students beside her whispered frantically, sneaking glances at her, waiting for her reaction. She offered none. Backstage, Darius's hands were still shaking when Sharon and Malcolm found him. Sharon pulled him into a fierce hug, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "You were amazing," she whispered, voice cracking. "Do you hear me? Amazing." Malcolm placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "That wasn't just singing, son. That was your truth. Don't ever let anyone dim it again." Darius blinked, overwhelmed, but nodded. For the first time in months, the doubt that had eaten at him seemed smaller. The next Monday, the school buzzed with talk of the talent show. In the cafeteria, kids stopped him in the lunch line. "Yo, Darius, that was insane. Man, you gave me chills. Bro, why didn't they let you in choir?" Darius would just smile, shrug, and quietly say, "Thanks." But inside, he knew the answer. And so did they. Later that week, Mrs. Whitaker finally spoke to him. She caught him in the hallway, her voice cool and clipped. "Mr. Carter, you surprised me the other night." Darius paused, his stomach nodding. Was this going to be another dismissal, another excuse? She hesitated, searching for words, her pride fighting against the truth. "Your performance was impressive." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't praise. It was something in between. But for Darius, it didn't matter. He didn't need her validation anymore. He had heard the applause of hundreds. He had seen the tears in his mother's eyes. He had felt the power of his own voice. He simply nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Then he walked away, lighter than he had felt in a long, long time. Months later, Darius's performance was still remembered. Teachers brought it up in the teacher's lounge. Students replayed shaky phone recordings of his song on social media, their captions filled with disbelief. "This kid isn't in choir?" And for Darius, the moment had lit something inside him. He joined the community youth choir, where directors welcomed him with open arms. He began performing at church and even local events. He wasn't just the boy who had been rejected. He was the boy who had risen. That night, long after the crowd had left and the applause had faded, Sharon tucked Darius in. He stared up at the ceiling, still replaying the moment in his head. "Mom," he whispered. "Yes, baby? Do you think they'll ever see me differently now?" Sharon leaned down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "They'll never forget what they saw. But the only thing that matters is that you finally saw yourself." Darius closed his eyes, a small smile on his face. For the first time, he believed her. And as he drifted off to sleep, one truth settled deep in his heart. No rejection, no doubt, no prejudice could ever silence his voice again. What did you think of Darius's story? Should he have been accepted into the choir from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Together, let's keep raising voices that deserve to be heard.